A very good morning to you, wherever you are watching us from. We are coming to you live from Parliament buildings in Nairobi. It is Wednesday, 19th July 2023, and in a short while we shall be linking up with members of the Senate as they engage in matters legislation. And Wednesday morning is a sitting day introduced for purposes of considering the questions and statements segment of the business of the Senate, and this speaks to cabinet secretaries appearing in the plenary to answer to various queries as presented by senators. And this morning, expected in the Senate is the Cabinet Secretary Education, Ezekiel Machogu, who I can confirm is within the presence of Parliament. And this morning, he is expected to be answering 8 questions from senators regarding the education sector. The first is from the nominated senator, Senator George Mbogwa. His question revolves around the delay in review of the Basic Education Act of the year 2013 that seeks to align it with the Constitution and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The other question is from nominated Senator Joyce Korir. Her question regards a project, a construction of a library block of hostels, a multi-purpose hall, and lecture halls at Bomet University. She says this project has stalled for the last 1 year. Nominated Senator Peris Tobiko also has a question for the Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu, and her question regards the purpose of the Grade 6 Kenya Primary School Education Assessment, KPSEA, that she wants a per county breakdown of learners in both public and private schools that sat for that assessment in the year 2022 academic calendar. And she also seeks to know how many of those learners graduated to junior secondary school. Nominated Senator Mariam Omar Sheikh also has a query for the Cabinet Secretary, and this one speaks to the attire of Muslim students in some public schools. And she claims they're not allowed to wear the hijab and trousers in addition to the prescribed school uniform. And here she is addressing the female learners, and she has specifically cited the Kenya High School and Alliance Girls High School as some of the schools that are denying Muslim students this right. Nandi County Senator Samson Cherargei has 3 questions for Ezekiel Machogu, the Cabinet Secretary Education. One touches on the amount of funds allocated as capitation to all public primary and secondary schools in the financial year 2022-2023. The other is a status update of the delocalization program as far as the transfer of teachers from their native place of birth to other localities is concerned. His third question is concerning a lifestyle audit conducted last year on senior officers at the Teacher Service Commission, TSC, including the Chief Executive Officer. And then his last query regards the total amount of money owed by the Teacher Service Commission to teachers' SACCOs and the trade unions that take care of the concerns of teachers, and that is the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education, Teachers KUPPET, and the Kenya National Union of Teachers, KNUT. If you're joining us, you're in time for live proceedings from the Senate this Wednesday morning, and it is a morning whereby we expect the Cabinet Secretary Education, Ezekiel Machogu, to present himself before the senators. As you can see on your screen, there is a special place set up for that purpose, a podium that has been put up so that when the time is right, then the relevant cabinet secretary is called upon to take their place and answer to various questions from senators. And this morning, the Cabinet Secretary Education will be responding to 8 matters. A brief recap of what was transacted in the Senate yesterday afternoon. You do remember that they resumed sittings yesterday after a 2-week break, and they have a very a full order of business. Yesterday, we saw the introduction of the Community Health Services Bill, Senate Bill number 24 of the year 2023. It is sponsored by Homa Bay County Senator Moses Kajwang, that speaks to regulation of the Community Health Services Bill. It spells out functions of the national government and the county government as regards to actualization of that Community Health Services Bill. Also, at 5 p.m., senators did adjourn to discuss the anti-government protests that are expected to take place today through to Friday, and led by the opposition. A live broadcast brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. Good morning and enjoy.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we beseech you to behold with abundant favor and blessings us, your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to leadership positions in this republic. We seek guidance to treat and consider all matters that shall come under deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you've committed to our church. Amen. Clerk, do we have quorum? Okay, Sergeant at Arms, ring the quorum bell for 10 minutes.
A quorum hitch in the Senate this morning. If you're joining us, you're in time for live proceedings in this broadcast. The Speaker of the Senate, the Right Honorable Amason Kingi, has just ordered the quorum bell to ring for 10 minutes, and this is to call upon members of the Senate who are within the presence of Parliament to make their way into the chambers and participate in this session. A minimum 15 required for a quorum, and in order for business to be transacted. And the business this morning is solely centered around the education sector. It will be question and answer time. And we expect the Cabinet Secretary Education, Ezekiel Machogu, to present himself in the chambers to respond to queries from the senators. He is already within the presence of Parliament, and as soon as we attain that quorum, then he will be in the chamber to respond to those issues. A podium has already been set for him, as you can see on your screen. And once he takes his position, then he will proceed to respond to 8 questions presented by senators, among them Senator George Mbogwa. He is a nominated senator. His query regards the Basic Education Act 2013 and whether there is work to align it with the Constitution and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to address the right to inclusive education for learners with disabilities and special needs. He seeks to know whether the Cabinet Secretary can provide a status report on the operationalization of the National and County Education Boards as stipulated in the Basic Education Act. He also wants to know the specific policy guidelines that are in place to ensure implementation of the home-based education program as stipulated in the law. The other question is from nominated Senator Joyce Korir and has regards a project that has stalled for almost a year at the Bomet University, a project that was to see the construction of a library block, hostels, and a multi-purpose hall, as well as lecture halls. And she wants to know measures the government is taking to ensure completion of that project. The other question lined up for Ezekiel Machogu, the Cabinet Secretary Education, speaks to the Grade 6 Kenya Primary School Education Assessment. This question is from Honorable Senator Peris Tobiko, and she seeks to know learners who sat for that assessment and how many of them transitioned to junior secondary schools. And her query is centered around the 2022 academic year. She also wants to know the criteria the ministry used to place learners in junior secondary schools and when the learners in grade 7 will transition to the existing secondary schools. Nominated Senator Mariam Omar Sheikh also has a query for the Cabinet Secretary, and she seeks to know whether the CS is aware that Muslim students in some public schools are not allowed to wear the hijab and trousers in addition to the prescribed school uniform. And here she's addressing female students and citing the examples of Kenya High School and Alliance Girls High School. And she says, or rather she questions why these students are being discriminated against, and this is despite clear provisions of the Constitution that says a person shall not be compelled to act or engage in any act that is contrary to a person's beliefs or religion. Nandi County Senator Samson Cherargei has 4 questions for the Cabinet Secretary. One regards the monies owed by the TSC, the Teacher Service Commission, to teachers' SACCOs and the 2 trade unions, namely Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers, KUPPET, and the Kenya National Union of Teachers, KNUT. Another question regards the amount of funds allocated as capitation to public primary and secondary schools in the financial year 2022-2023, and he wants to know the amount that has already been disbursed to institutions, as well as what is remaining. Senator Cherargei also seeks to know the procedure that guides disbursement of funds to the schools and the measures the government has put in place to ensure timely allocation and disbursement of those funds. So Wednesday is the day that the Senate has 2 sittings. This morning sitting, there is also an afternoon sitting, and all that will be dictated by whether or not a quorum is achieved in the Senate this morning. The quorum bell is ringing. It has been ringing for the past 5 minutes or so, as ordered by the Speaker, the Right Honorable Amason Kingi. A 15 member threshold is what is set to constitute a quorum in the Senate. And once that bell has rung for the 10 initial minutes, then the Speaker is expected to give further guidance as regards what next. And that will be determined, of course, by the status of the House in terms of numbers this morning. Yesterday, in addition to just a brief recap of what was discussed, there was introduction of the Community Health Services Bill 2023. There was also a debate, commencement of debate on the Persons with Disabilities Bill, Senate Bill number 7 of the year 2023. It is sponsored by nominated Senator Crystal Asige, and it speaks to really the recognition of persons with disability as far as their rights are concerned, as far as access is concerned, as far as equity and equality is concerned, that they deserve to have access to education, to employment, to facilities. And it speaks to what needs to be done by both levels of government, the national and the county, to ensure that persons with disability are comfortable and feel as much Kenyan as every other person when it comes to accessing places, especially public spaces, buildings, accessing public transport. And it is a bill seconded by the Nandi County Senator Samson Cherargei that seeks to ensure inclusion for persons with disability and seeks a collaborative effort by all agencies, all stakeholders, everyone that is concerned with upholding human rights to ensure that the rights of persons with disability are taken care of. Later at 5 p.m., senators did adjourn to discuss a motion of urgent importance, and that speaks to national cohesion and unity, a motion sponsored by Embu Senator Alexander Mundigi. It was also seconded by Senator Cherargei. And essentially what senators discussed at length was the status being witnessed this morning, the first day of what the opposition claimed were to be 3 days of anti-government protests, demonstrations in protest of the high cost of living, the economic status in the country. And it is a discussion that caused quite a heated debate in the Senate that led to the sitting speaker at that time, the Honorable Veronica Maina, to order two members, two Senators Dan Manzo and Senator Cherargei Samson, to table evidence rather in the Senate. They are required to do that this afternoon regarding claims they made in the chambers yesterday. Honorable Manzo claiming that the majority party and really the government was not protecting protesters who are doing so peacefully. And Senator Cherargei saying that he will table evidence regarding the Sondu clashes, and claiming that the opposition knows what exactly went on in that border town. It is a live broadcast that is brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. And any time now, we shall be hearing further directions from the Speaker as regards this sitting that really should already have taken off. Sittings normally on Wednesday morning are required to start at 9:30. It is now 9:46. And since there's no indication of a quorum yet, then it would appear that the Speaker has added 10 more minutes. Just additional time so that members who are still outside the chambers can come in and participate. Because really these standing orders, rules and regulations set by members themselves to guide their operation in Parliament and in Senate, to be specific. And so it will be prudent that they show up as required, and so that business can be transacted. Of course, based on the awareness that already they are engaged also in a number of areas that speak to their legislation mandate. For example, there is the Senate Ad Hoc Committee on the Proliferation of Religious Organizations that is investigating the Shakahola deaths, a committee that has been sitting for quite some time, and which this morning is expected to hear from the Office of Public Prosecutions. That office is expected to make its submissions before the senators investigating that matter. Already more than 400 people have been confirmed dead from that tragedy in Shakahola. More than 200 autopsies conducted. The exhumation exercise, the autopsy exercise continuing down in Kilifi County, the location of that very tragic occurrence in recent times in Kenya. And it is a matter that is not only being investigated by the Senate, but also by the country's investigative agencies, all working, trying to establish what really happened, what really caused the death of so many people. And to just touch a bit on what senators have been up to, in the 2 weeks recess, they have been holding meetings in their various committees, discussing a number of issues that touch to their legislative mandate, especially oversight of county governments. There is a very thorny issue that speaks to border conflict, and currently there are at least 15 cases filed before the Senate that touch on boundary disputes. There is the Kisumu-Nandi conflict, Kisii, Nyamira, to name just a few. Senators have also been listening to submissions from representatives of the community policing program, popularly known as Nyumba Kumi, where elders, those engaged in the Nyumba Kumi initiative, are seeking recognition in the form of a stipend, just something to appreciate the role they play in ensuring law and order at community level. Also, as they resume sittings, they are expected to discuss and dispense with the cash disbursement schedule for county governments. It is something that is required of them so that 47 county governments in the country can have their provisions and run their functions as required. This schedule, once tabled in the Senate, will be referred to the Committee on Finance and Budget, and that is according to the standing orders of the Senate. And this particular committee will then submit its report. That will be discussed by senators, and if approved, then it will give the opportunity for the devolved units to get what they require, what they need. That's just a brief of what is expected from senators during this second session of the 13th Parliament. The quorum bell still ringing, and the Speaker, of course, using this opportunity to just consult with members, probably using this time to also catch up, but really just getting ready for what lies ahead, what is expected to be not only a long morning, but also a long day, seeing that there is also an afternoon sitting where there are at least 2 bills that are expected to be introduced in the House. Senators are also expected to continue with debate on the Persons with Disability Bill, Senate Bill number 7 of the year 2023, sponsored by Senator Crystal Asige, nominated. They are also expected to make some amendments to 2 bills in a committee of the whole. 4 bills actually in a committee of the whole. That is what among activities that await them this afternoon. That in addition to discussing pending motions and even petitions that may be brought to the House, either by the senators themselves or by members of the public via the committees. For example, yesterday we had 2 petitions being submitted in the House, reports concerning 2 petitions, one on the launching of a victims' rights charter as provided for under the Victim Protection Act number 17 of the year 2014. And this is after the Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights considered submissions from one Mr. Nayan Savla, who was aggrieved by the delay in developing and launching of that victims' rights charter. Mr. Savla claims to be a victim and believes that more needs to be done to make sure other victims like him do not suffer. He is a victim of a family-related crime, and he says his experiences exposed him to deeply frustrating flaws in the system, leading him to believe that an operational victims' rights charter could have given him better support. And it is this personal frustration that anchors his drive to have this particular law enacted, and also streamlining of the operations of the Victims Protection Board established in the year 2016. The other petition was from Mr. Paulo Mosbey concerning the Torobek community, a marginalized community that is seeking recognition, that claims to be marginalized, and that has also presented human rights. further guidance from the Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Amason Kingi, regarding the status of quorum in the Senate this morning, and he has added more time. The bell is still ringing, more time, so that our members can come in. What awaits them is question time, hearing from the Cabinet Secretary Education, Ezekiel Machogu, and eight matters await him in the Senate this morning. Issues that touch on the education sector, which he should address this morning. Probably address that, and also the fact that this morning public schools in Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu remain closed for security purposes and to protect learners and teachers and parents, as it were, in the event or in case of any eventuality that might arise from the anti-government protests. The clerks of the Senate on standby, as are the orderlies who are just checking to see who is within the chambers and who is yet to clock in. A minimum 15 senators required. That is what constitutes a quorum of the Senate. And a number that is really ideally achievable. And as per the standing orders of the Senate, standing orders 39, 40, 41, that speak to quorum of proceedings, to start with 39, which says that a quorum of the Senate, or a committee for that matter, of the whole, shall be 15 senators. That is a number we are lacking this morning. And that if there is no quorum present, then the chair is taken at the time of appointment or appointed for a sitting of the Senate. The Speaker shall immediately after the prayer order the bell to be rung for 10 minutes. That has happened. And then if there is no quorum present at the expiration of the 10 minutes, the Speaker may direct that the bell be rung for a further 10 minutes, which is what the Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Kingi, has just done. And so we await, because if after 10 minutes the number of members in the Senate is less than 15, then the Speaker will have the discretion to adjourn the Senate forthwith to the next sitting. And in this case, this next sitting is this afternoon at 2:30 p.m. And that is what is spelled out very clearly in the standing orders of the Senate. A broadcast courtesy of the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation and the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit. If you're just watching us, it is 10 a.m., 30 minutes after what is scheduled to be the start time of the morning sitting in the Senate, a sitting that is yet to take off. that will only commence once a quorum is attained. And once that happens, in addition to the question and answer session mentioned earlier, there are a number of motions also listed for consideration in this morning's sitting. One touches on incorporation of intelligent water management systems in building plans for sustainable living. It is sponsored by Senator Wahome Wamatinga. There is another on integration of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya. It is sponsored by Senator William Cheptumo. The third motion is declaration of cattle rustling as a national disaster and establishment of a special fund for victims, also sponsored by Senator William Cheptumo. Those are the three motions that are also lined up for debate this morning in the Senate, and all that pending the attainment of the requisite numbers in the chambers. The Speaker consulting there with the clerk, probably discussing the next course of action. What will happen in case we do not have that quorum that is envisioned. And what will go on in case we do attain it, in case there is that quorum. The quorum bell is still ringing in the Senate this Wednesday morning. It has been ringing for the past 20 or so minutes, and it will continue to do so as ordered by the Speaker.
Honorable Senators, can you be up? Honorable Senators, there being no quorum, and having rung the bell pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 40, the Senate stands adjourned until today, Wednesday, 19th July 2023, at 2:30 p.m.
There you have it. That direction by the Speaker of the Senate, the Right Honorable Amason Kingi, adjourning sittings of the Senate this morning due to a lack of a quorum. 15 members were required for a business to be transacted this morning. However, that was not achieved. Senators will be resuming this afternoon for the second sitting of the day. And until then, my name is Vereso Mwanga. On behalf of the entire crew, I take this opportunity to take you back to Broadcasting House, where we have our news check crew on standby. Have a very good morning.